Commissioner Coring,
Here.
Commissioner Lupke,
Present.
Commissioner Barrows. Here. Commissioner Franzi. Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Good. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Jason McCoy, I'm here with IT Director Sean Strong from the City of Brainerd to present an opportunity for us to broadcast our board meetings on the Brainerd Community Channel. This, right now, our board meetings are stored on YouTube, but this would also allow it on public television. There'd be no cost to the county, and Sean can give a little bit more background on what they're doing and how they've been doing it for the past handful of years?
20. Yeah.
20 years?
So to get everyone on the same speed, I'll just kind of go through where we've been and where we're at. 20 years ago, the City of Brainerd started the cable channel through the high school and Lakes Media Collaborative. It ran for about 15 years until 2019, I think it was, when both the high school and the City Hall got remodeled. So all the head-end equipment got taken out and the channel ceased to exist for a couple of years. And at that time, we were just streaming to YouTube for a couple of years during the pandemic. In fact, we were in this room for like a year or so, I think, using your stuff. In mid-22, so 3 years ago, we partnered with the Central Lakes College to revive the cable channel. And the city, I should back up, the city collects a franchise fee from cable subscribers in the city of Brainerd. It's 5% a year. Turns out to be about $120,000, half of which goes to our general fund and half of which goes to pay for this cable channel. We take that money and hand it straight over to CLC and say, please operate our cable channel. So they get all of that half of the money, about 60 grand, and that pays for the connections between City Hall and CLC and part of their staff time and everything else. So we've been back on the air for about 3.5 years now, I guess. We typically stream all city meetings live. The college staff comes over to all of our meetings, which are evening meetings. Most of them are evening meetings. Operates the whole thing for us, so there's no labor involved for the city staff, which is lovely. And then we rebroadcast those meetings throughout the day. There's 10, 12 meetings rebroadcasting for the 2-week gap between the meetings or a month gap between the meetings. So we have 24 hours a day on a cable channel, lots of capacity. Well, I shouldn't say that because I don't want too many other meetings out there, but I emailed the county and emailed the school district and said, you know, we could sure broadcast your meetings in a time slot on a regular basis as a service to the cable subscribers, which obviously City of Brainerd's looking out for the residents, but I think the cable territories cover most of Crow Wing County, as far as I know. So Charter and Spectrum and CTC cover a good swath of central Minnesota, so I think a good chunk of Crow Wing County would see these meetings too, in addition to the city meetings and the school district meetings. So,
And I guess one thing I'd say is ours would not be live on that. It would be a pre-recorded. Right. So after you guys have your meeting, we would download that, get that over to Sean or CLC, and then they would just upload it to their cable channel, and it would fall into one of the open time slots that they have available.
yep.
So it'd be exactly what we put on YouTube at
Correct.
this point in time.
Yes.
No cost to us,
Correct.
Correct.
just a service to the charter or the, whatever you call your group
Yeah,
now.
Spectrum and CTC subscribers
Okay.
on the cable side, yeah.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lubke?
we will also still have it on YouTube also?
Correct, yes. Nothing would change there. We'd still keep continuing doing what we're doing. It would just be after the fact, we'd download that meeting and upload it to the cable channel and for it to fall into one of their time slots.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So Debbie, if you can tell us what's the next step in this process?
There's no action that's needed from you no formal action that would be needed to do so. Basically, this was just to kind of gauge the appetite of the board. If this is something that you are interested in pursuing, Jason and Sean would work together to get done what needs to get done, and we would add that rotation onto that cable access channel.
I'll just weigh in and say I don't see a downside to this, so I would support it.
I would too.
I'm absolutely interested in doing it, so.
I think you have your direction.
All right. We'll we'll move forward on that.
Probably get started in January, I would
That
guess.
sounds perfect.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jason,
Yes.
thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Next up, Gary and Chris. Sorry, Chris.
Good morning.
Next up is Chris, not Gary.
He's always back there. Just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with the ordinance revision process. It seems I missed one of my documents, but that's okay. So just to maybe a recap, to go back to looking at where we're at, we started this process back in October here at the Committee of the Whole. We went through the 30-day comment period that started October 21st, went to November 21st. We ended up, it says 9 comments, but one person had 3, so we actually have 7 comments, but one person had a few extra comments. So we had 7 total comments that we received, and then we got some information from the DNR that gave us a conditional approval letter. We also had some more coordination with MPCA. We had to make a few administrative changes to our septic side of the ordinance. And then we also found, when I was looking through Article 15, I was on the Office of Cannabis Management website and found out that they had the wrong reference for a piece of statute that had to be in there, and so we need to fix that as well while we're at it. It was actually in the OCM, it was in their model ordinance, and so we pulled it in. We just used their model ordinance, and so OCM now is going to be changing their model ordinance to show that counties have to use 394 and the city or town has to use 462 for that part of the statute. So that's going to get changed at the OCM level. But we had a public hearing on last Thursday before the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. We had a couple folks there that provided some testimony, wanted to make sure that we weren't reducing or lessening the restrictions or lessening the requirements for vegetation on our natural environment lakes. And those, the 2 that made the testimony, they were the only ones. And then the board considered and had some conversation amongst themselves, and they made a recommendation to the county board to adopt the ordinance as it was written, as it was amended to the county board. They wanted to make one change, though. We have a current definition. We use a current terminology we use the term vegetated buffer, and we don't have a definition for that. And so the board, the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment requested we would use the term no maintenance buffer, which we have a definition for that in the ordinance, so we know what that means. Basically, it means no maintenance buffer means that whatever depth back from the lake, it means you agree to maintain that to no lower than an 8-inch height, is how we kind of term that. And so that was their recommendation. But they also understood that there might be some discussion about, is 25 feet the right number? And so part of their discussion mentioned that they would be, how do I want to say it, not okay with, but they understand that maybe there might be a little bit of a smaller buffer, maybe on our recreational development and our general development lakes. And, we had talked about what that might look like, and there was some discussion, maybe 10 feet wouldn't be the right buffer on our GD and RD lakes, but they were really wanting to make sure that a 25-foot buffer was what we had on the natural environment lakes. And so that was the recommendation that they brought back to the board for your consideration. If it's okay, I just want to take a step back and just do a couple of more of a reminder of currently what do we have in the ordinance as far as buffer requirements, because the idea of having requiring buffers on shoreline is not new to our ordinance. We currently, if you have a situation right now where you're a lot owner and you live on the lake and you want to come get a permit and you're over 20% impervious, you're over that 20% hard cover, you're going to have to put a buffer on your shoreline. If you come in and you apply for a variance, and the Board of Adjustment, in their role there as a PCBOA, as a Board of Adjustment, they will typically require a buffer in those situations because you're building closer to the lake, and so they would have a buffer there. So the idea of requiring buffers this is not a new concept for the county. I think it's important to point out that when we're looking at this slice or this part of the buffer, this would only apply to those folks that are applying for a permit and they're coming in for a shoreline recreational use area. And that shoreline recreational use area is basically where you're going to clear and basically have a spot 30% of your shoreline where you're going to be able to put things like a beach, or maybe you're going to put like a, maybe you want to put like your water-oriented accessory structure. Those areas where you're going to be using that part of the shoreline. And what this does is it basically just says the remaining 70% of that shoreline, we want that to be put into a buffer. So if you've already got a beach, you know, you've already, so if you're on, you know, Pelican, Whitefish, you already got that great beach and you're not coming in for a permit, you're not going to be asked to do this. It's only going to be for those folks that are asking for a permit to really intensively remove vegetation on 30% of your shoreline. We're just saying the 70%, you know, we'd like that to remain in more of a natural buffer and not be mowed down straight to the water's edge. And I think, yes.
And that goes with the property, though. I mean, if
Correct.
person sells it, they still get to have
Yep.
whatever's
Yeah,
present at the time.
that requirement would transfer.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, there's always the question, why? Why does this matter? Why is this important? And so one reason that it's really, I think, important for this is that we've adopted comprehensive watershed management plans across the county for our 3 major watersheds, our 4 major watersheds, and every one of those has a goal of wanting to restore natural vegetation in our shorelines across the lakes within the county. So that's, you know, that's in our comprehensive plan for the county. That's one of our goals. And then the second one is that I've been asked to sit on a committee across the state that the DNR has been putting on about consideration of how our natural shorelines in the state are doing, basically. And I've been asked to represent counties on that committee. And the DNR has been doing some studies, and they're finding that we're losing, you know, quite a bit of our natural shoreline to the tune of about 1% every 10 years, give or take. And so because of those, you know, things that we've been involved in and things that we've adopted, that was the reason, kind of the purpose behind the idea why this ordinance and having some requirements for buffers in some very strict situations and very limited. It's not going to apply to everybody. We're not going to come to people today and say you have to do a buffer now, and if they're not coming to us for a certain type of a permit. So it's limited in scope, but I do think in the long run it would make a difference to maintain and you know, help with the overall water quality of the lakes within Crow Wing County.
Questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lee was first.
Go ahead. You can go. That's
Oh,
fine.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So just, so I want to make sure I'm on the same page. All existing, if they're already built and have it mowed to the shore, that would stay the same. Any new
Yes.
construction, these would apply to, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep, correct.
thank you.
Commissioner Lubke?
And that only applies to GD and general government recreational lakes, correct?
If we're talking about the buffer in 11.20, that the one we're introducing, that would require the buffer on GD, RD, and natural environment lakes.
But isn't that already required on natural environment lakes by the ordinance that we have for natural environment lakes, that you don't disturb that?
So what we have right now is a standard for our GD and our RD lakes that we require them to basically can't intensively clear cut and remove vegetation in shore impact zone 1 of a GD and an RD lake. So for a GD lake, that'd be 37.5 feet. For a recreational development lake, that'd be 50 feet. And then we have a separate standard for a natural environment lake, which requires a 25-foot buffer with it now, but it doesn't, it's not, the language isn't written such that we could require them to restore that if it's mowed down to the water's edge. And so that's why I think it's important that if we're going to want to really work with these folks on natural environment lakes, if we incorporate that into the GD and the RD standard that we have, we're managing shore impact zone 1, that would require a 75-foot buffer then on a natural environment lake for those lakes that haven't had their vegetation removed. And so having that in place, I think, is more restrictive on a natural environment lake than our current ordinance requires now. And if we adopt that section, that 11.20, where we're going to have the restoration work, it would maintain, I would recommend that it would maintain at least a minimum of a 25-foot buffer for those natural environment lakes that have already mowed down to the water's edge. It would maintain that 25-foot buffer, as you mentioned, Commissioner Lubke. But I do think at the same time, it would make sense maybe to reduce that buffer from a 25-foot down to 10-foot for GD and the RD lakes.
The only thing that concerns me, and because I've run into it already in my little time that I've been here, is you buy a lot, you buy on a natural environment lake, you go in there and you just mow it all down. You're not even looking for a permit. You just come in and mow it all down because you think you can, because it's your property. Now you've already gone past that impact zone. You've already gone down to the lake, and now you find that out. What do you have? Do you have a recourse to say, come back and put those trees back, put back that brush, whatever is down there? Or you just say, just put in some other native species plants and we'll call it good?
That's a great question, and I think if you remember that situation we had last summer up on the Whitefish chain, where we had some folks
Yes.
clear cut right down, and so we required them to get a vegetation plan done by a professional, which included replanting trees, shrubs, and the ground cover, and we also required them to place a financial assurance in place to make sure that that work was completed to the tune of about $50,000. So we absolutely have the ability, and we do, when people decide to remove that vegetation on the shoreline, we do have the ability to go back and make them restored, and not just, like you said, restore it to just a bunch of, maybe some grass, but to restore it back where you get the trees and the shrubs and the understory, the brush, as you mentioned, to come back. So absolutely, we have that ability in the ordinance for that restoration of those situations.
Yeah, my main concern, and it was pretty much ever since you put this in, was the fact that, if we go back 20 or 30 years ago, there's some ordinances that we wish we would have been maybe a little tighter on, that now it's too late. I don't want to set anything up with our natural environment lakes, because they are such an integral part of protecting our water quality of all the lakes, by making sure that they're maintained well and they're kept in a natural environment area, that we step backwards at all. And that would be my only concern about this, that I agree on the general development lakes, that we can do anything we can to get people to have more vegetation in the shoreline area versus a riprap versus what they have. If we can get them to start going that way, that's fine. But most of those lakes are already done. Right now, we have the natural environment lakes that haven't had that impact on it yet. And I don't want to have any kind of ordinance in place that's going to push us backwards in that area. Because right now, we're pretty much done with the general development lakes. All that property is pretty much gone, and it'll just be people redoing it. Right now, we do have some pretty tracts of natural environment lakes that have not had any, I don't know if you want to call it improvements, but I haven't had anybody disturbing them yet. And I would like to do everything I can to maintain that quality. That's my statement on that. And as far as your 70-80 rule, on that 70-80, don't we have the 70-80 rule, and all we have to do, that's just making sure we meet all the MPCA and stuff requirements? Is there any more that we have to do on that, other than just go through it and check mark those areas that we haven't got it right and fix it?
Right, no, that's, for when we're dealing with 70 or the septic side of it, they do have a provision, because there's 70-80 through 70-83, there's actually 4 rules, part of that, and one of them is that requires a local ordinance, and there's a few things that they require there to be in the local ordinance, and that's what MPCA staff, because we adopted our ordinance for septic probably in 2014, 2015, so it's been about 10 years, and we haven't made any modifications to it since this point. And so they've made some changes to their model ordinance, and then so they identified a couple of those issues in our ordinance that need to be cleaned up and fixed. So that's 70-80 is more of just a cleanup, and then administratively, then it is really a change in policy.
Just one other question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. On that no maintenance, that concerns me a little bit. No maintenance is one, if I go in there and I brush it down to the lake, and now you come back and say you shouldn't have done that, you're gonna have to leave this alone. That doesn't mean some of that woody plants and stuff are gonna come back up in there. Does that mean you have to restore it then, back to what the pre-condition was?
So I think we have to remember we're talking two different things here that we're trying to
I know.
accomplish. So the first one that we're trying to accomplish is that the first part of 11.20 really is working with those properties that have, as you mentioned, not disturbed the vegetation and that. And so situation where somebody's on a natural environment lake and they come in and they say they cut down all the vegetation, cut down all the trees, the understory, we would treat that just like we did that property up on Whitefish Way. They would have to restore that back to what it was with the tree cover and the brush and the understory. But let's say we've got a situation where somebody's got a natural environment lake that maybe they had a lot there and it's been there for 50 years and they've been mowing it to the water's edge and now they decide they want to put a little beach in. This will give us the opportunity to require them to do a 25-foot no maintenance buffer. It may not be get it back to maybe the woody, the trees and the shrub like you mentioned, but it would at least get us back to the point of where we're having that native vegetation on that shoreline, which is going to slow that water down and try to contain and collect some of those pollutants before they run into the water. So there are two separate things I think that we're dealing with in the ordinance right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have not changed my position on this. I'm not supporting this. I'm not voting for it. In my mind, I think it's kind of an overreach, and well, I'm not gonna vote for it. That's it.
Okay, so will this come to us on
Next
Tuesday's meeting.
next week?
Yep.
Okay,
Is there time for two more items, just to
Sure.
give you a couple updates?
go ahead.
One update, and so much fun to have this. We actually have received a call from somebody who wants to do a wind, or do a solar farm in Crow Wing County. And so we don't have anything in our ordinance right now that deals with how would you handle a solar farm or a wind farm. We have a piece in the ordinance about if you want to do it for your personal property as an accessory structure. And so we will need to amend the ordinance this winter to include a section.
Sorry. When he told me last week, I'm like, again.
We're all in the same boat. So I've been doing some research already and talking to some other counties who have ordinances in place that we can use as models to be able to use. So it should not be too hard to use that as a plug-in to we have a section already on solar and wind, but it's just more for personal use than it is for those bigger farms. And so I have spoke with the applicant who is interested in doing it. And depending on their timing and how long it takes to get this done, if they were to come in and maybe, give us an application today, I would probably be coming back to you and saying we might need to put a moratorium in place until we get that ordinance up and running, so that then we have a set of guidelines upon which to follow that. So just a kind of a heads up that's coming down the pike, that we need to add something to ordinance as far as dealing with solar and wind.
Well, should we be considering a moratorium at this point to give you time to?
I don't think so. I think as I've talked with the applicant, I think they're understanding the situation that we're in, and so they have some time. And so I think that if we could work on getting that ordinance up and going, first quarter of 2026, I think that that would fit their timeline just fine to be able to get the project in and done, so.
Mr. Chair, and just from a process standpoint of things, we wouldn't put a moratorium in place on something that we don't have an application or a reason to do so. So as long as Chris has had the communication with the applicant, kind of knowing what his timeline is, knowing that we do need to include something in our ordinance, that we will need to work through that amendment process, he's already working on what needs to occur for that. So I think we can avoid the moratorium part by being proactive and getting the amendments done as quickly as we can.
And then the
Mr.
last
Chair.
item is just,
Question.
No?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, so just explain this to me. So we don't have anything in the ordinance pertaining to that. So then somebody wants to do that. They come, they talk to you, you say, oh, well, we don't have anything. So then that means they can't do it, right?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. One is that they could, you could argue it's not in the ordinance, so it's a prohibited use. But at the same time, we're not allowed to outright prohibit any use within the county, so I think we would be susceptible to a lawsuit. And I think we would be at risk of them getting a judgment, be able to locate that solar farm where they want to, and without any sort of regulatory oversight from the county. So I think without having it's the same idea with, say, adult uses. We are not allowed to outright ban adult uses within the county. And if we try to do that, we'd get sued and we would lose on that because we can't just ban a use. We have to determine where is the most appropriate spot for that to be. And without having that in the ordinance, we would be very susceptible to a lawsuit if we just said, if somebody made an application and we denied it, we would get sued on that, and we would, I don't think we'd prevail on that.
So then, if we had an ordinance and we had a moratorium, that means that then we wouldn't accept any applications for solar farms, correct?
Correct. It would mean, yeah, we would take a timeout and we would put the effort in to get the ordinance updated so that we'd have the regulations in place when they did apply.
Yeah. Well, I'll just let the rest of the board members know that I'm, as this moves forward, as of right now, I don't know that I would be supportive of I don't like solar farms. I think it ruins the landscape. I think about the moratorium that we have, Crow Wing County has had for years and years on billboards. I feel like it's kind of the same thing. It just it ruins the aesthetics of Crow Wing County that people expect when they're coming up here and vacationing. And if you ever travel from Brainerd down to the cities and you go by some of these solar places, these solar farms, they're gobbling up this beautiful farmland, and they're not as efficient as you might think they would be. So as of right now, unless somebody can convince me otherwise, I'm not going to support solar farms or ordinance going along with that. Period.
I think there's another issue too, Commissioner, that's how they get taxed. And if they keep them under so many, is it kilowatts or whatever their measurement tool is?
That's by megawatts. Yeah.
Megawatts, then they get taxed at one rate. If they go over that, then it's commercial rate. And but they can divide properties to make sure they don't go over it, and they get that lower tax rate. We know in central Minnesota, Sherburne County and those counties are dealing with that issue at this point, and I think AMC is going to be addressing that at the upcoming legislative session. So
Okay. The third item that I have is just
Before we go on, Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
in order to not put us behind the eight ball, maybe we should consider a moratorium so it gives us the time to do the homework, to have the ordinance in place before we have an application coming on board, instead of reacting to an application that comes on board and figure out how we can make an ordinance to fit that application. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm not much into moratoriums, but I'm also not much into trying to backpedal because we have something in front of us and have to deal with it. I'd rather deal with it ahead of time.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lubke, I think that is what staff is working on right now, is dealing with it ahead of time before we actually get an application before us. Putting the moratorium in doesn't really have any impact if you don't have an application in front of you at this point in time. Basically, it would just say no applications will be considered, but staff are already working on what those regulations might need to be in that regard. If we were to get an application that came in today, tomorrow, next week, whatever it might be, you could take the action at that time to put the moratorium in place. But to put the moratorium in place, then put the amendments in, then take the moratorium off, there's just a snowball
Okay.
that kind of goes into play here. I think the fact that we have the heads up, or that we have the alert that this is going to be moving forward, that staff is working on what that ordinance, what those amendments should look like or potentially could look like, I think puts you in the right position without having to take any action at this time.
I think we accomplish things much better if we have the ordinance in place when the application comes in. And that's what you're proposing here, Chris, so
Exactly.
I think,
And I think it's important for the board to consider what you would like the regulations to look like. What would you like the permitted uses to look like in regard to solar farms versus being reactionary to an application that might be in front of you? If you wait and do something until you get an application, sometimes then it's more reactionary in that regard, that you're trying to either allow or prevent based on what that particular application might say. If we take the action to put regulations in place now before we have anything in front of us, then it's more well-planful in that regard.
yep.
And I think the performance standards seem pretty consistent across ordinances. It's just really, the question is, where would they be located and what would be the process of permitting depending on size and those sorts of things. So I've looked at Stearns County, I've looked at Murray County, I've looked at Douglas County, and I'm just trying to get a flavor for how some of those county, how they handle that. And definitely, I think there's a little bit of contention with them, for sure. And so, you know, we want to make sure that the rules we have are clear and consistent and understandable and can be implemented, you know, and that, so.
Real quick, you know, we have a solar field out at the airport, and I'm not sure how that got developed when we're talking about ordinances and that.
Yeah, so I think when things happen on the airport, I think because that was county, city, you know, airport out there,
No.
we didn't have any.
The airport commission is the planning and zoning commission for all that property.
Okay,
Yep, so that's why we do.
thanks, Commissioner.
And this request would be on private property, so then that's when the regulatory would be needed to make sure it's, you know, done properly, I guess, so.
Okay,
The last time I had, Mr. Chair, just real quick, was that, you know, you received an email from the DNR last week talking about doing a public waters inventory update. And so the legislature in 2024 required the DNR to basically do a public waters inventory of every county in the state. The goal is to get that completed by 2032. And so the public water inventory was completed by the DNR back in the 70s, which really identified what are the public waters across the state of Minnesota and what. So this is not a complete rebuild, or they're not starting over, but what the statute asked the DNR to look at was, did they miss any designated trout streams within a county? And then there were water courses that were removed from the public waters inventory back in 2017 by a commissioner's order, and they want those to be reevaluated to make sure that they should they or should they not be in the public waters inventory. And then there's also public water, there's public water wetlands, and so they're going to do another review of the public water wetlands to make sure that they meet statutory criteria. Because for say a city or a town, it's considered a regulated lake if it's 10 acres or more, and for the county it's 25 acres. And so, and I've talked with the DNR staff. We had a meeting recently with them, and we've had the DNR look at our regulated waters twice as we've done ordinance revisions, so I'm pretty confident that there won't be any significant changes, but they're going to be doing a review. They would be, if you're interested, they'd be happy to come and have a conversation and do a presentation at a county board meeting or committee of the whole if you're interested. There's going to be public outreach meetings where they're going to be holding some open house opportunities for folks to come in and have conversations and that, and there'll be comment periods when if they decide to change things and that, but they'd be happy to come and just give you an update if you would be interested, so.
anyone interested? I guess not.
Okay, sounds very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One thing before you run off, Chris.
Yeah.
Just to get back to the wind and solar thing. If we're looking at an ordinance for that, do we need to be looking at this data center stuff too?
It's on my list of things to think about. That, you know, I think at a minimum, if we do this ordinance update, I think we should add a definition of a data center, and we should decide what zoning district we want it to be located in, which I think industrial would be, I think, where we'd want to have it located. But, you know, as far as the performance standards and stuff, I don't know what's really out there as far as how that's, since it's so new. But I do think at least putting something in the ordinance says this is at least where they would be located if they wanted to come and have that discussion with the county and what type of a permit they would have to get.
One thing to think about, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, with regard to data centers, there is a lot of water need with a data center. In most cases, they're going to be located in a city that's going to be on a municipal water service. I don't know that it is quite as advantageous to do it on a private well type of situation. And remember, we're putting ordinances in place for areas of the county that we manage land use for. So any of those things that might happen within the city limits of one of our municipalities would be at the jurisdiction of those individual cities who do their own planning and zoning. We'd only be looking at putting restrictions or putting provisions in place for those areas where we do provide that service. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind there. I know Chris and I have talked about it a little bit, and I know AMC is also working on some stuff around data centers as well, but it is one of those things that's the slight difference there where we might be hearing from some of our municipalities that are more concerned about putting some of those provisions in place just because of the resource need that's required for that.
How do we know that, so they put it in a city, that they aren't impacting the aquifer that outside the jurisdiction of the city is being impacted?
So so that would be the determination of the city to make based on what they have as far as their water supply and how much water they generate and use per day. So the cities would be the ones to determine that. Ultimately, it's a DNR. So the DNR is responsible for, we look at water quantity. Department of Health is water quality for groundwater.
Okay.
And so, if, let's say you're on a well and you're gonna use more than 10,000 gallons of water a day or 1 million gallons in a year, you have to get a water appropriation from the DNR to allow you to draw that water up out of that well. When you're on city water, the city's gonna have to have that discussion with the DNR as well, because technically, when you're, depending on where you get your water source from, either from the ground or usually from a river, depending on how much more water you would take up would require a different, permit needed from, the DNR for those sorts of things. So that would be, again, the DNR is responsible for making sure we don't have issues with water quantity.
Okay, thank you. Interesting world.
Yes, it is. Thank you very
Gary,
much.
did you have something, Gary?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lupke?
so here we're talking about putting an ordinance in place for a data center, even though we haven't had an application. No. Correct?
No, we're not looking at adding anything to the ordinance with regard to data centers at this point. This is just a data point, if you will, that Chris has on his radar of things that he's looking into. But we're not looking at making any adjustments at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Just real quick, back to the buffers. Just wanted to be clear on, currently is the PCBOA recommended 25 feet on RD, GD, and NE. I have spoke to a couple, is that what you want to bring forward, or you guys want to see 10, 10, and 25? Does that make it a little more appealing? We heard from Commissioner Coring that he's a no. Just wanted to, I don't know if you guys caught that or not when Chris was explaining that, but you do have that option. I mean, it's a big change, so 25 feet versus 10, it's going to consume a lot more of their, let's say, backyard. But would that be more appealing to see how this works for you? Or something to consider. Just wanted to make sure you guys are, that's a big one.
I guess I'll just say that I'm not sure how I feel about all of it. As an outdoorsman, I'd rather see more buffers, but I'm kind of torn because I still feel people have a right to use their property the way they want to. So I guess I need to look at it a little closer before I would tell you my thoughts there. But
And I'll stop over for more discussion too and better understanding for me.
And then all I had then is Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Merry Christmas.
That's all we have for today, Mr. Chair.
I think we're adjourned. Thank you.
Chris? Chris?